Breaking news. A black woman was arrested today for defying a bus driver when asked to move out of her seat. On December 1st, 1955, the quiet strength of Rosa Parks turned her no into a yes for change. Rosa Parks was born on February 4th, 1913, and grew up in Tuskegee, Alabama. Rosa grew up on a farm with her mother, grandparents, and younger brother. She went to public school and then went to Alabama State Teachers College for Negroes to get her secondary education. She soon dropped out to take care of her ill mother and grandmother. It is evident through Rosa's devotion to her family and their health that she was a kind and passionate person who knew it was important. Rosa Parks first remembers experiencing racism as a little girl when the Ku Klux Klan marched down the street in front of her house while her grandfather guarded the door with a shotgun. Rosa experienced racism at school, even to the point of being physically bullied. Thinking back on her childhood, Rosa once said, "As far back as I can remember, I could never think in terms of accepting physical abuse without some form of retaliation if possible." Rosa Parks naturally became a civil rights activist. She was involved in defending blacks in many cases, served as a secretary for the Montgomery chapter of the NAACP, became the member of the Voters League, and attended Communist Party meetings with her husband. Even 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, Americans were still suffering from segregation. Around the turn of the 20th century, the former Confederate states had adopted new constitutions and electoral laws that effectively disfranchised black voters. Under the Jim Crow laws, people of color had to be separate from whites in public places and public transportation, and the segregation of restrooms, restaurants, and water fountains. The first 4 rows of seats on each Montgomery bus were reserved for whites. Buses had colored sections for black people, generally in the rear of the bus, although blacks comprised more than 75% of the ridership. The sections were not fixed, but were determined by placement of a movable sign. Black people could sit in the middle rows until the white section filled. If more whites needed seats, blacks were to move to seats in the rear or stand. If there was no room at all, they had to leave the bus. Black people could not sit across the aisle or in the same row as white people. The driver could move the colored section sign or remove it altogether. If white people were already sitting in the front, black people had to board at the front, pay the fare, then disembark and re-enter through the rear door. For years, the black community had complained that the situation was unfair. Parks once said, "My resisting being mistreated on the bus did not begin with that particular arrest. I did a lot of walking in Montgomery." After working all day, Parks boarded the Cleveland Avenue bus around 6 p.m. Thursday, December 1st, 1955, in downtown Montgomery. She paid her fare and sat in an empty seat in the first row of the black seats reserved for blacks in the colored section. Near the middle of the bus, her row was directly behind the 10 seats reserved for white passengers. As the bus traveled along its regular route, all of the white-only seats in the bus filled up. The bus reached the 3rd stop in front of the Empire Theater, and several white passengers boarded. The bus driver, James F. Blake, noted that 2 or 3 white passengers were standing at the front of the bus and had filled to capacity. He moved the colored section sign behind Parks and demanded the 4 black people give up their seats in the middle section so that the white passengers could sit. Years later, in recalling the events that day, Parks said, "When that white driver stepped back towards us, when he waved his hand and ordered us up out of our seats, I felt a determination cover my body like a quilt on a winter night." By Parks' account, Blake said, "Y'all better make it light on yourselves and let me have those seats." 3 of them complied. Parks said, "The driver wanted us to stand up, the 4 of us. We didn't move at the beginning, but he says, 'Let me have those seats.' And the other 3 people moved, but I didn't. The black man sitting next to her gave up his seat." Parks moved, but toward the window seat. She did not get up to move to the redesignated color section. Blake said, "Why don't you stand?" Parks responded, "I don't think I should have to stand up." Blake called the police to arrest Parks. Parks said, "When he saw me sitting, he said if I was going to stand up, and I said, 'No, I'm not.' And he said, 'Well, if you don't stand up, I'm going to have to call the police and have you arrested.' I said, 'You may do that.'" We've all heard the Rosa Parks story. We know her story well. While segregation was going on in the United States, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus for a white man. But why don't we ever hear the rest of the story? Why don't we hear about the part that matters, the part that made all the difference?